Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 397 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin, head coach of the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers, respectively. By the time this podcast comes out, the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers will have faced off in one final game of the regular season to decide who wins the AFC North. And look, this is a great rivalry, but right now the biggest similarity between the two is they both have longtime head coaches. John Harbaugh has been the coach of the Ravens since 2008, while Tomlin has been at the helm in Pittsburgh since 2007. Most pundits would have you believe that the loser of this game is in jeopardy of losing their position, and they've been saying this about Mike Tomlin, it feels like, for the last 5 years, and it's getting old. But more recently, they've been starting to say the same thing about John Harbaugh. As a sports fan, I am interested in the idea of a coach holding a team back. I mean, the knock on Mike Tomlin right now is he's reached a place where his teams never have a losing record, but rarely are a top seed in the NFL. But I'm also somebody who believes that what you should strive for as an organization is consistency, and no head coach in the NFL is more consistent than Mike Tomlin, because he is going to give you a chance to make the playoffs, and then anything can happen once you get there. And I keep going back to this thought when I think about Mike Tomlin. He is not the problem with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think this is an organization that needs to find a franchise quarterback. I mean, the last 2 seasons of relying on Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers to be their old selves is kind of ridiculous. Wilson did not work in Denver, so he tries it in Pittsburgh. Aaron Rodgers did not work with the Jets, so he tries to find himself in Pittsburgh. It hasn't really worked out in both cases. I think both of them have played just fine for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but neither have been the Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks they used to be. The Steelers' 2 rivals have franchise quarterbacks. The Cincinnati Bengals have Joe Burrow, and the Baltimore Ravens obviously have Lamar Jackson. That is the missing ingredient in Pittsburgh. If I give Mike Tomlin a quarterback the caliber of Joe Burrow, I believe, and I'm sure most of you do, that the Steelers would be competing for Super Bowl titles. The other position the Steelers need to fill on their roster is at running back. When I think of the great Pittsburgh Steelers teams, I think of great running backs. Franco Harris, Jerome Bettis. The last time I really took the Pittsburgh Steelers seriously, they had a great running back in Le'Veon Bell. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers need to get back to having a great run game because it's in their DNA of great Pittsburgh Steelers teams. I get why people have such high standards for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they're not the Steelers of the past. Like, I don't look at their roster and think they have one of the best teams in the NFL. Yes, they have great individual players. TJ Watt is arguably the best defensive player in the NFL. DK Metcalf is still a really great wide receiver. But as most of you know, the NFL comes down to who is your starting quarterback, and the Steelers the last few years have been relying on the last years of Russell Wilson as a quarterback and now Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. Now, this is a weird critique to possibly have about Mike Tomlin, but maybe his problem is he has not bottomed out. The Steelers have never gotten the number 1 overall pick because they've always been somewhere in the middle. I mean, he's never had a losing season. He's never going to get a high enough draft pick to pick the right starting quarterback to lead the franchise. I mean, yeah, they drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round in 2022, but that was with the 20th overall pick. The chances of that panning out were slim to none. That's not where these teams are finding the Joe Burrows of the world. I believe if the Steelers truly do move on from Mike Tomlin, it won't be to win right away. It will be for them to bottom out so that his successor can find the next franchise quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. My argument is the guy who should be the head coach of the next great Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback should be none other than Mike Tomlin. That's the big difference with John Harbaugh right now, is he's coaching one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the league right now, a two-time MVP in Lamar Jackson, and now most people are just speculating about what the relationship between these two individuals is. The thinking there being that if Lamar Jackson likes John Harbaugh, he's going to remain the coach of the Ravens for a long time, and if he doesn't, then he truly is on the hot seat. I feel this has been a weird year for the Ravens. Lamar Jackson has had an up and down season. He hasn't really played at an MVP level. I would give John Harbaugh a pass for this season. Again, I don't look at him and go, he's the problem with Baltimore. The argument against Harbaugh is the Ravens are supposed to be in win now mode. If you're not going to win a Super Bowl with this team right now, then you're probably not going to win one at all. I think people are more interested in the topic of these two losing their jobs than actually logically looking at the situations and going, what better options do the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens have at the head coaching position? I mean, I look around the league in the NFL and I go, most NFL head coaches are not that good. They are not at the level of a Mike Tomlin or a John Harbaugh. These are not easy guys to replace, and that's why these teams have held on to them for so long, because they found diamonds in the rough. Say what you want about both of them, but they are proven commodities. I mean, the risk is you let go of Mike Tomlin and you bring in a coordinator from another team who has had success as a coordinator but will not pan out as a head coach. And the same goes for the Ravens. What I like most about both of these franchises is they're not going to make brash moves. They're not going to move on from Mike Tomlin just because people want them to. And the Ravens are not going to move on from Harbaugh just because people want them to. They're going to do it if they believe it to be the right decision for the organization moving forward. Yes, there's a world where the Steelers look at this year and say to themselves, we went all in. We got this guy, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, in Aaron Rodgers. We got him DK Metcalf. We gave Mike Tomlin all the tools for success, and he did not reach our expectations, so we have to move on from him. I look at that and I say, wow, that's a wild choice. And the Ravens could feel the exact same way about John Harbaugh. I mean, they could look at the other teams of the AFC and say, why are we not better than the New England Patriots? How did that happen? How did a team like that become better than us? How are the Buffalo Bills still better than us? Why are we not improving? See, the people who work at ESPN and these other NFL analysts try to tell you how they think these organizations should feel about these two coaches, but we really don't know. I mean, maybe the Steelers are going to ride it out with Mike Tomlin until the very end of his career. The crazy thing about Mike Tomlin that doesn't get brought up enough is the fact that the man is still only 53 years old. So there's a case to be made that the Steelers could have Mike Tomlin as their head coach for the next 20 years. And I think ESPN would still have the same old conversation about whether or not the Steelers should move on from Tomlin. I don't want to be having that conversation for the next 20 years. Please. The other conversation people love to have about Mike Tomlin is the fact that he hasn't won a playoff game in 9 years. I get it. For some people, the NFL is all about winning playoff games, and if you're not doing that, you're just as bad as everyone else. I don't look at sports like that. I think you should be trying to stay consistent. Year in and year out, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers put out a respectable product. Not to mention, he has all of the qualities you want in a head coach. He's very good at public speaking. He always takes the blame for what's going on within the organization. He's a great interview. He's the guy you want to be the face of the operation. Whenever there's been a controversy during his tenure with the Steelers, he's kept his mouth shut about it. I think you're crazy if you're looking at Mike Tomlin's resume and saying he should have 4 Super Bowl titles by now. I think he should have 2. I think they probably should have won that Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers, but that didn't happen. He went up against Aaron Rodgers at the height of Aaron Rodgers. But to say that he's now underachieving, coaching, and aging Aaron Rodgers, that to me is ridiculous. And getting back to John Harbaugh, he's had great success with 2 quarterbacks. Not a lot of head coaches have done that in the league. He's coached Joe Flacco to a Super Bowl, and he's coached Lamar Jackson to 2 MVPs. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, people knock Bill Belichick all of the time for only winning football games with Tom Brady. Well, John Harbaugh has done it with not 1, but 2 quarterbacks. What really does irk me about the conversation surrounding firing these 2 men is that most people will say, well, if Mike Tomlin were to be let go by the Steelers, he would get a job immediately. Well, it's like, okay, so you're saying the Steelers should think about moving on from Mike Tomlin, but you're also saying that a team like, let's say, I don't know, the Cincinnati Bengals should hire Mike Tomlin immediately. So what I gather from that is you think Mike Tomlin is one of the best head coaches in the NFL, so why exactly would the Pittsburgh Steelers move on from him? Just to shake things up? Just to change things to see if they could get better? What's the plan in that? That's not a plan. Getting rid of Mike Tomlin or John Harbaugh is not a plan. It's a huge reset that would change how you view both of these teams. If the Steelers go into next season with a new head coach, I would view them as a far lesser team, a team that will likely have a losing season. If I were the Steelers, I would only move on from Tomlin if I truly want to bottom out, if I want to draft a quarterback at the number 1 overall position, because that's what you can't do when Mike Tomlin is your head coach. He's not going to have a season where he only wins 4 games. I don't think he's interested in doing that. In fact, I believe that if the Steelers wanted to bottom out, Mike Tomlin would want to leave them as much as they maybe wouldn't want him to be their head coach moving forward. Here's some more thoughts on the situation. I think these are 2 great head coaches we're talking about, but I don't personally put that much stock on a team with who their head coach is. Like, I don't think the Steelers are what they are because of Mike Tomlin, or the Ravens are what they are because of Harbaugh. I think how good you are as a team generally comes down to the players you have on the roster. I think it's weird if you're a fan of the Steelers and it would get you excited by the notion of them moving on from Mike Tomlin. He's a head coach. He's not on the roster. People used to have this idea about Bill Belichick, and I always used to say it's about the players on the Patriots. It's about Tom Brady more than it is about Belichick, and I don't mean that as an insult. That's what sports is. It's about the guys on the field. Yes, talking about the coaches makes for great conversations, but they don't have that much impact. The difference between last year's Baltimore Ravens team and this year's Baltimore Ravens team is last year Lamar Jackson was playing like an MVP level quarterback, and this year he isn't. That doesn't have that much to do with John Harbaugh. Maybe the Ravens are going to look at this down year and blame Harbaugh. I think they would be incorrect. incorrect in doing so. And I feel the exact same way about the Mike Tomlin situation. If he had an MVP level quarterback, the Steelers would be one of the best teams in the entire NFL. And I do want to get back to this whole notion that fans of the Steelers should be sick of them being 10-7 and 9-8. I don't get that. The worst thing to be in the NFL is a team that wins 4 to 5 games a year. That's really bad. That's unwatchable. And that is something the Pittsburgh Steelers have never been during the Mike Tomlin era. They've never been unwatchable. They've always been entertaining. I don't feel as strongly about John Harbaugh, but I do think now would be a weird time to move on from him if you're the Baltimore Ravens. The off seasons for both of these two teams should all be about improving the roster. It should not include looking for a new head coach. I will not be excited about the Ravens moving on from John Harbaugh to hire somebody else, and I would not be excited for the Steelers to move on from Tomlin and hire somebody else. That will not improve the teams. Improving the teams would be adding more talent to the overall rosters. I think this is a great note to end this podcast on. I also hate the idea of one game deciding how you feel about a head coach moving forward. Like the idea that Mike Tomlin gets to keep his job because he beats the Ravens tonight and vice versa with Harbaugh. That is not okay. If the Ravens are going to stick with John Harbaugh, it should be because they think he's the right head coach moving forward, and the same goes for Tomlin. One game should not decide whether or not you believe in this coach. Some of you might disagree with what I'm saying because we're talking about the NFL and it's all about one game. I mean, it's all about the Super Bowl. It's all about the playoffs. But one game, unless it's a complete disaster, should not change how you feel about Mike Tomlin. For a guy like him and Harbaugh to lose their jobs, I think they have to have a major downslide. I think Mike Tomlin deserves that. Bill Belichick lost his job because he lost his way as head coach of the New England Patriots. They really bottomed out. He wasn't making the right decisions anymore. That has not yet happened with Mike Tomlin. That is how I think Mike Tomlin should lose his job. If he ever loses his job, he deserves the right to remain the head coach of the Steelers as long as he's having winning seasons. Now, my feelings about Harbaugh could change if I find out later on that Lamar Jackson no longer wants him as the head coach of the Ravens, because I do believe in giving your star player what he wants. And if he doesn't want to be coached by Harbaugh anymore, I think the Ravens need to explore that. But until that becomes a reality, John Harbaugh should not lose his job with the Ravens until he has a really bad run of a season or two. If I had to make a prediction, I believe both of these two men will be back next season coaching these two teams. I think Mike Tomlin will remain head coach of the Steelers and Harbaugh will remain with the Ravens. But this is the NFL. I don't know how this game on Sunday is going to play out. Maybe one of them does make a giant mistake that costs them the game. And I have to keep saying this. We know how fans feel. We know how the media feels. They're sick and tired of the Mike Tomlin era in Pittsburgh. They're sick and tired of the John Harbaugh era in Baltimore, but none of that matters. All that matters is how these two respective front offices feel about these two men as NFL head coaches, and I have to think they think very highly of both of them. And that's why I continue to think that this has become a made-up narrative, that people want Mike Tomlin to no longer be the head coach of the Steelers, and now they're trying to do that same narrative with Harbaugh and the Ravens. It's like, guys, do you know how many bad NFL teams want Mike Tomlin to be their head coach? Do you know how many bad NFL teams want John Harbaugh to be their head coach? There's a reason for that. The consistency is what these guys should be after. It gives you the job security that they currently have. I fully understand believing that these two should have won more than one Super Bowl each. But having said that, this is the NFL. There's going to be ups and downs. You're not going to be great every season. I love that I know what the bottom is for Mike Tomlin, and it's still very good. I love that I know what the bottom is for John Harbaugh, and you're still very good. I like both of these coaches, and I hope both of them keeps their job if they want to. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.